The Senate will come to order. Mr. Carpenter, please call the roll.
Senators Bridges, Cook, Coram, Court, Court,
We have a excused.
Crowder, Danielson, Donovan, Finberg, Fields, Foote, Gardner, Janal, Gonzalez, Hill, Heisey, Holbert, Lee, Lundeen, Marble, Moreno, Pedersen, Priola, Rankin, Rodriguez, Scott, Smallwood, Sonnenberg, Story, Tate, Todd, Williams, Winter, Woodward, Zinzinger, Court. Mr. President.
Here, with 35 present, 0 absent, 0 excused, we have a quorum. Members, this morning we are honored to have Mackenzie and Joshua. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate waive Rule 1B so that a non-member may lead us in the pledge.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted, and we will suspend Rule 1B. Members, this morning we are fortunate to have Mackenzie and Joshua Schaefer here, are two of the homeschool students from Christian Home Educators of Colorado, here today for Homeschool Day here at the Capitol, leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the journal. Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the reading of the Journal of Wednesday, April 24, 2019 be dispensed with and that the journal be approved and corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Senate Services.
Regularly printed, Senate Bill 260, correctly engrossed, Senate Bill 188, 223, 228, 232, 248, 251, 252, 253, 254, 256, and 258. Senate Resolution 12, correctly re-engrossed. Senate Bill 8, 15, 20, 40, 66, 73, 107, 108, 158, 177, 186, 193, 195, 199, 204, 222, 227, 235, 236, 240, 242, 245, and 246. Correctly revised. House Bill 251, 1290, 1291, and 1307. House Journal Resolution 1012, correctly revised. House Bill 1003, 1006, 1088, 1122, 1133, 1138, 1147, 1160, 1183, 1222, 1247, 1267, 1269, 1285, and 1294. Correctly enrolled. Senate Bill 94, 133, 154, 164, 166, 167, 178, 229, and 230.
Third reading of bills, consent. Mr. Carpenter, please read all of the bills. Mr. Carpenter, please read all of the bills on the third reading consent calendar.
House Bill 1290 by Representative Martin, Senator Priola, concerning substitution of foreign work experience for the required contact hours by an applicant for examination pursuant to the Barber and Cosmetologist Act. House Bill 1291 by Representatives Arndt, Senators Williams and Tate, concerning the supervision of insurers in connection with establishing certain disclosure requirements for insurers. House Bill 1051 by Representatives Carver and McLaughlin, Senators Gardner and General, concerning human trafficking prevention training by the Department of Public Safety in connection with making an appropriation. House Bill 1307 by Representatives Kraft, Tharp, and Larson, Senators Lee and Gardner, concerning the clarification that the disclosure of a report of mistreatment or self-neglect of an at-risk adult shall only be made at the at-risk adult who is the subject of the report. Senate Bill 256 by Senator Bridges, concerning an appropriation made to implement House Bill 181299, concerning electronic documents related to the ownership of a vehicle. Senate Bill 254 by Senator Zenzinger and Representative Ransom, concerning the Nursing Home Penalty Cash Fund and in connection therewith making an appropriation. Senate Bill 253 by Senator Rankin, Representative Escar, and Ransom, concerning specifying that the Department of Education is not a state agency for purposes of the Office of Information Technology. Senate Bill 252 by Senator Moreno and Representative Escar and Hansen, concerning the timing of Joint Committee of Reference hearings under the State Measurement for Accountable, Responsive, and Transparent Smart Government Act and in connection therewith reducing an appropriation. Senate Bill 251 by Senator Rankin and Todd and Representatives Hansen and Titone, concerning the implementation of certain recommendations from the independent evaluation of the state's information technology resources and in connection therewith making an appropriation. Senate Bill 248 by Senators Tate and Bridges and Representatives Singer and Baisley, concerning a requirement that the Director of Research of the Legislative Council convene a working group to conduct an analysis of the state tax system used by the Department of Revenue and in connection therewith making an appropriation. House Bill 1285 by Representative Lontine and Senator Fields, concerning the requirement for the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing to contract with the managed care organization operated by Denver Health and Hospital Authority until the managed care organization ceases to operate a Medicaid managed care program. Senate Bill 258 by Senator Rankin and Representative Escar, concerning child welfare services funded through federal child welfare laws and in connection therewith making and reducing an appropriation. House Bill 1122 by Representatives Buckner and Landgraf and Senators Fields and Gardner, concerning the creation of a maternal mortality review committee in the Department of Public Health and Environment in connection with making an appropriation. House Bill 1006 by Representative McLaughlin and Carver, Senators Fields, concerning measures to mitigate the effects of wildfires within wildland urban interface areas in connection with clarifying the legislative intent and state funding of the existing forest restoration and wildfire risk management grant program be increased in making an appropriation. House Bill 1269 by Representatives Gutter and Sullivan, Senators Janal and Gardner, concerning measures to improve behavioral health care coverage practices in connection with making an appropriation. House Bill 1294 by Representatives Benavidez and Hakazilis and Senator Story, concerning a requirement that the Chief Administrator of Australia Colorado Community College System create a working group to determine the best manner in which to facilitate the transfer of our construction industry registered apprenticeship program credit to college credit in connection with making an appropriation. House Bill 1133 by Representatives Carabeo and Pelton and Senator Fields, concerning the creation of Colorado Child Abuse Response and Evaluation Network in connection with making an appropriation. House Bill 1088 by Representative Buck and Valdez, Dean, Senator Donovan, concerning modifications to the existing income tax credit for healthcare preceptors working in healthcare professional shortage areas and in connection therewith, clarifying the definition of preceptorship and extending the existing sunset date for the tax credit.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 256 lay over until tomorrow, Friday, April 26th.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 256 will be laid over until Friday, 4/25/2019. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the passage of all the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar, which includes House Bill 1290, 1291, 1051, 1307, Senate Bill 254, 253, 252, 251, 248, House Bill 1285, Senate Bill 258, House Bill 1122, 1006, 1269, 1294, 1133, and 1088.
Is there any discussion on any of the bills? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of all the bills on the third reading consent calendar. Are there any no votes? Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask to be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269.
Senator Sonnenberg will be recorded as a no vote on Senator Sonnenberg, did you say 1261? 1269. Senator Sonnenberg will be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269. Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also request to be a no vote on House Bill 1269.
Senator Hill will be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269. Senator Marble.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also wish to be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269.
Senator Marble will be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269. Senator Crowder.
I'd like to be voted as a no vote on 248.
Senator Crowder will be recorded as a no vote on Senate Bill 248. Senator Woodward.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269.
Senator Woodward will be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too like to be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269.
The Minority Leader will be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1269. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1290 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Moreno, Hill, Tate, Smallwood, Gonzalez. Sonnenberg. Rankin. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1291 is passed. Co-sponsors. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1051 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Bridges, Fields, Crowder, Woodward, Zenzinger, Todd, Winter, Story, Gardner, Cook, Rodriguez, Lundin, Scott, Williams, Tate, Priola, Marble, Heisey. Please add the President. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1307 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senator Crowder, Senator Tate, Senator Cook, Senators Todd, Moreno, Priola, Smallwood, Marble, please add the President. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Senate Bill 254 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Tate, Rankin, with a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Senate Bill 253 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Lundin, Crowder, Sonnenberg, Priola, Smallwood, Todd, Cook, Woodward, Tate, Scott, Marble. Please add the President. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Senate Bill 252 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Gardner, Crowder, Gonzalez, Bridges, Janal, Todd, Rodriguez, Tate, Rankin, Zenzinger, Court, Priola, Cook. Please add the president. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 251 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Donovan, Tate, Bridges, Lee, Janal, Fields, Rodriguez, Story. With a vote of 34 ayes, 1 no vote, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 248 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Moreno, Todd, Court, Donovan, Pedersen, Priola. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1285 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Crowder, Janal, Court, with a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 258 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Crowder, Priola, Tate, with a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1122 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Story, Todd, Priola, Moreno, Pedersen, Janal, Zenzinger, Winter, Tate, Court, Bridges, Gonzalez. Please have the president. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1006 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Bridges, Lee, Moreno, Janal, Todd, Lundeen, Woodward, Winter, Story, Gardner, the Majority Leader, Priola, Court, Quorum, Rankin, Donovan, Tate, Williams, Heisey, the Minority Leader. Please add the president. With a vote of 30 ayes, 5 no votes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1269 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Zenzinger, Moreno, Lee, Patterson, Winter, Priola, Bridges, Todd, Story, Fields. Please add the Senator Court, Tate. Please add the president. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1294 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Heisey, Woodward, Moreno, Rankin, Zenzinger, Sonnenberg, Williams, Crowder, Pedersen, Todd, Priola, Fields, Cook, Janal, Gardner, Tate, Gonzalez, Bridges, Scott. Please add the president. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1133 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Pedersen, Moreno, Crowder, Tate, Janal, Priola, Todd, Bridges, Smallwood, Story, Rankin, Winter, Court, Williams, Heisey. With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, House Bill 1088 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Janal, Crowder, Woodward, Scott, Rankin, Tate, Priola, Heisey, Sonnenberg, Pedersen, Todd, Third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 223.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 223. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Bill 223.
Senate Bill 223 by Senators Lee and Gardner and Representatives Weissman and Landgraf concerning actions related to competency to proceed in connection with making and reducing an appropriation.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of myself and Senator Gardner, we move Senate Bill 223 on third reading and final passage.
Senator Lee will be fined $2 for referring to me as the chair. Senator Gardner.
Thank you. Mr. President and colleagues, Senate Bill 223 is a culmination of really 2 sessions worth of work concerning the competency to proceed against individuals who have been charged with crimes. We have a large and growing issue in our state of those charged with crimes not being competent, or at least their public defender or other defense counsel having to request a competency evaluation and then a need for restoration. There is an overwhelming lack of capacity to deal with these issues. Last year, you will recall, if you were here, that at midnight of the 120th day, then Senate Bill 252 died, which was to deal with this problem. And I think that was because of an imperfect compromise that had been made. Senate Bill 223 is another run at that, and it appears that it will be successful. I thank my co-prime sponsor for his work. You heard yesterday that this has been the subject of a court case against the state of Colorado for which penalties were imposed. And so to not solve the problem is not only a disservice to those who have been charged with crimes and are not receiving the mental health treatment they need in order to effectively participate in their defense, but a disservice to the criminal justice system and the people of Colorado. So I urge your support on Senate Bill 223.
Is there further discussion?
Well done.
Seeing none, the motion before the body is the passage of Senate Bill 223 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Senate Bill 223 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Crowder, Story, Gonzalez, Moreno, Priola, Tate, Todd, Zenzinger, Janal, Pedersen, Bridges, Rodriguez, Court. Please add the president. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 228.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 228. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of Senate Bill 228.
Senate Bill 228 by Senators Winter Moreno and Representatives Bunteo and Singer. Concerning measures to prevent substance abuse and in connection therewith requiring certain prescribers to complete substance use disorder training, prohibiting physicians and physician assistants from accepting the benefits of prescribing specific medications, requiring opioid prescriptions and bear warning labels, allowing medical examiners access to the prescription drug monitoring program, providing funding to address opioid and substance use disorders through public health interventions in local communities, requiring state departments to report receipt and eligibility for federal funds for HIV and hepatitis testing, requiring the Office of Behavioral Health and the Department of Human Services to administer grant programs, requiring the Center for Research into Substance Use Disorder Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery support strategies to develop and implement a program to increase public awareness concerning the safe use, storage, and disposal of antagonistic drugs, to conduct a needs assessment among others in pregnant women, and to implement a grant program, requiring the Office of Behavioral Health and the Department of Human Services to administer child and maternal health pilot program and making an appropriation.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move on third reading and final passage, Senate Bill 228.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, don't say that we're not thorough and that you don't know exactly what's in this bill. But unfortunately, I have to ask for the dreaded permission to offer a third reading amendment.
Will the good senator from Commerce City please tell us why we should allow you permission to offer a third reading amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we discovered two issues in moving quickly through this bill last night. One is the effective date doesn't line up properly, so this is a technical correction to make sure that that lines up correctly. The second issue is there is an aspect of this bill that we meant to be reviewed in a couple years, and unfortunately, language around repealing the requirement was included instead, so it would change that back to review.
The question before the body is to allow the senator from Commerce City permission to offer a third reading amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have, and permission is granted. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L026?
Amendment L026, symbol 228 by Senator Winter, amendment gross bill page 13, strike lines 20, subs 225,
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Amendment L026.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, as I explained, this aligns the effective date up with the bill. And then the other piece was there was, as I stated, language that repeals a requirement in this bill after a number of years. We had intended for that language to be review over after a couple of years, and unfortunately the repeal language was still in the bill.
Is there further discussion? Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. And my question goes with the review portion aspect of this. Is there any ability by the legislature after the review? Typically in a sunset, we do the review and then we reauthorize. Is this just a review without a reauthorize? Will the program continue? Is there a reason we would not want to have that sunset?
Senator Moreno.
Senator Sonnenberg, thank you, Mr. President. To the senator from Sterling, that is a great question. You're right, sometimes we just review things, sometimes we review and then repeal things. This one is really an important aspect because it is around demonstrating competency with the use and handling of opioids and prescribing those opioids. So the review language, if this amendment is adopted, will be included, but certainly happy as this bill moves through the process to talk about if it's appropriate that not only a review happen, but an automatic repeal. I think those are conversations we'd be open to.
Further discussion. Senator Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate that. And the truth is, I would rather leave that in so that we actually have to make sure that we reauthorize, make sure that we are doing what we need to do, and it's just not on autopilot. However, I am not willing to kill the whole amendment because you have some others, and I probably am not willing to go through the process of severing the amendment. So
I will be a yes. I wish we would have done that differently, however, and allow the sunset to stay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L026 to the Senate Bill 228. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin, Woodward, Hill. With a vote of 32 ayes, 3 no votes, 0 absent, and 0 excuse, Amendment L026 is adopted. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 228 as amended.
Is there further discussion? Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members, I rise in support of Senate Bill 228. I did have the privilege and pleasure of serving on the Opioid Interim Committee for a couple of years, and it's just kind of interesting to see how long it's taken to get so many recommendations into law. And I think when you think about the length of time associated with that, that just shows how complicated the issue is overall, and how much stakeholdering is required. One thing I want to call members, I think particularly I'm interested in, and why I'm very supportive of the bill, is the section of the legislation that calls for a maternal and child health pilot program. If you think about things we've talked about in the past couple of years, and we even discussed it here this session, related to marijuana use in pregnant and breastfeeding women, and just the overall difficulty we've had just even saying that marijuana may not be the best choice to treat nausea. Similarly, I can tell you from OBGYN practitioners I associate with that drug misuse and abuse and addiction is an increasing problem for pregnant women, and professionals in that area are not really trained at dealing with addiction issues. And so what this part of the legislation does is helps create a funding for a pilot program to kind of create an integrative healthcare approach that will both address the woman patient, her in utero baby, as well as the connection to substance abuse, and hopefully have an integrated healthcare delivery that can bring both patients through term and in delivery in a healthy, as I guess I would say, as in healthy disposition as possible. So I'm particularly excited about the fact that we're funding something as kind of unique and as important as maternal fetal medicine and its interaction with substance abuse. Thank you, members.
Is there further discussion? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, there are aspects of this bill that I like, but I think the drawbacks for me are greater than the positive aspects, and I will be voting no. The previous speaker, I appreciated his speaking on this and actually highlighted some of the reasons why I have concerns about this bill. The comment was that it's taken so long to enact, and that's true. And the reality is we're a body designed to take a long time. We're a body designed to be very slow about changes that we put into place, because we make changes and we only get to make at most one change a year on a particular issue. For example, it's going to go into law, and if there are 2 competing changes for any given year, right, we get a letter on our desk saying that there's potential conflict here. And it gets printed up and it gets written in these books that don't change. If anything, they change once a year. Oftentimes it takes years and years and years to change them. And so what we're saying here is that it takes a long time, but we should put something in place that's not going to change anytime soon. So we're putting some requirements and some expectations in here that we know is going to take a long time to make future updates to them. And the reason that concerns me is that the speaker also mentioned that, you know, professionals in this area don't understand a lot about addiction. But by passing this bill, we are making the assumption that We do understand about addiction, and we understand more than the professionals in the field, and therefore we're going to codify them in a way that is not likely to change for many years to come. And the reason I'm concerned about this is not necessarily even that I'm concerned about the specific things we're doing right now. But the reality is when you look at the addiction challenges and when you look at the history of the last couple of decades, we culturally have moved from an area where pain management was underutilized and created an environment. We created a culture, not a government-run culture necessarily, but a culture where more prescriptions, more opiates were used in the course of treating pain and surgery. And now we can look back on that and say, well, we caused some problems with that. We can also look at some of the challenges with the FDA and conflict of interest problems over there. But we as a culture said we want to use more opiates to manage pain. That's what the professionals said. And now the professionals are coming back and saying maybe that was short-sighted and we need to rethink how we've been dealing with pain management. But this bill says, hey, rather than having an ongoing conversation within the healthcare and medical community, it's saying we understand enough about this, we know enough about this, that we're going to codify exactly what people ought to know about it. And that's the expectation that I fundamentally disagree with about our role in here. We have thousands of doctors in Colorado, tens of thousands of doctors and healthcare professionals in Colorado, and we're saying we need, in our own unique way, we need to step in and weigh in on this conversation in a way that I believe is actually culturally we're dealing with very effectively. And so that, while I agree with some of what we're doing here, I disagree with the notion that the 35 of us understand better what should be done about opioid and opioid abuse and substance abuse more generally than the tens of thousands of healthcare professionals out there and the rapidly changing environment that exists around this culture. And I think we ought to be more cautious before we put in slow-to-change rules, regulations, and laws rather than continuing to trust our healthcare professionals to help us through this crisis. I respectfully ask for a no vote.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. To the prior speaker's comments, I agree that there is a legitimate question of, is this the right way to do it? And I think that's a lingering question that I don't know we'll be able to get to the answer in the course of this debate. It's something that we may find out over time, potentially based on the success or failure, or as so often happens, the inadequate gains in progress of a government program that may be before us based on this. My questions or arguments against the bill are much more narrow in their scope. The first question I have is a narrow objection, but it's a huge potential outcome over time. And it's the nature of, we are acknowledging right up front, the fiscal note says, on an ongoing basis, the bill will increase state expenditures, local government expenditures. So from the get-go, we're acknowledging expensive, and you look at the fiscal note, this is not chump change. This is a material amount of money that we're investing, and we're creating additional full-time government employees as part of this effort, and that's the beginning point. And then as we roll, it is anticipated it will grow and grow and grow. That's a challenge. It's a narrow argument, but it's a big potential fiscal problem over time. The second argument I bring against this bill is very narrow in its nature, and it's my objection that we're using marijuana tax cash money for this as we are for so many things, and that's a misrepresentation of what the people who voted for Amendment 74 thought was going to be the way things played out here in the state of Colorado. They were told at that time, broadly, if you go back and look at the TV ads, it was very, very clear. The tax money is going to go for the school children. And the reality is, that's not the way it's played out. And I think that there is a disconnection from the expectations of the public and what we're doing with that money. And this bill is yet one more example of a violation of that public trust, where we said, here is the purpose, here's what we will do over time with the money, and now we're choosing to do this. Now, you can argue there's a nexus. It's one drug versus another drug, and therefore there potentially is a nexus there. And I see how you can easily make that argument. That argument stands, and I cannot refute that. However, My concern and my argument is it's a misrepresentation. It's part of this erosion of the public's trust of us as elected officials when in fact we say one thing and then do another. And that is a challenge, but I think it is in fact a reason to give serious pause, and it is part of my objection and ultimate respectful no vote on this bill. So given those three things, the uncertainty if this is the right way to approach this program or not, is a government program the right way to do it, the creation of an expensive government program with additional government employees, with the clear call on the front side, over time there will be ongoing expenses on an ongoing basis, the fiscal note says. The bill will increase state expenditures, local government revenue and expenditures, and potentially state revenue from gifts, grants, and donations. So there's this expansive piece, and then there is this concern. Are we doing right by our word, what was told of the people, what the people voted for with Amendment 64 or not? Based on that, it is very respectful and a full acknowledgement of the crisis that does exist in society today that I urge your opposition to 228. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry, I wasn't necessarily going to come up, but I just want to talk about where some of this came from. So, as you know, we are facing a public health crisis. We have been working on a huge package of bills every single year, and it's not going to be solved in 1 year. It's not going to be solved even in the next couple of years. This is going to be a decade of work on constantly adjusting our laws, reevaluating where we are, directing money where we need, where we continue to have gaps. So this piece about the ongoing education for the cycle of licensing. So when you're going to renew your license, that there is a minimal requirement. We are saying to DOR that they're going to come up with the standards only up to 4 credit hours. So we're really limiting this on the amount of workload that it's going to take to ensure that we're bringing our providers, our prescribers, up to speed. The language actually comes from around Dora, who is working with the medical board on what doctors, what prescribers need to know around when to prescribe opioids, when not to, safe disposal, what do you do when you recognize that somebody has a problem, and then also the PDMP piece, and actually how we can utilize the data that we have to identify when a patient has a problem. So we made sure that we took reasonable steps in creating a training process, well, I guess updated information that all prescribers, and if you don't prescribe opioids, there is an exemption here, but that we're really moving towards going away from a system that incentivized overprescribing, and the doctors have been caught in the middle of this. So this was created by pharmaceutical companies that created incentives for overprescribing, really played down the risk that opioids placed in our communities and the addiction risks, and here we are today. Number 1 cause of death for people under 50 years old, and is the reason why 3 years in a row we have actually, our life expectancy has gone down. This is this is a huge deal for our state. I want to thank everybody for your work on this over the last few years. We're going to have to continue to work on this every single year. And the funding is only going on for 5 years. I would say that it should be 10. We were not going to come out of this for a decade. So this is ensuring that we put minimal standards in place for awareness around when to prescribe, when not to prescribe, what do you do when somebody has a problem, and how to utilize our database to recognize when somebody is at risk. So I ask for your support.
Is there further discussion? Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I really wish we were looking at this bill in pieces instead of in the sort of omnibus bill that it is, because I want to commend the proponents of this bill for adding some pieces in here that you have heard me preaching about for years that I would like to see in law. And so to see it actually in a bill makes me very, very happy, and I think it's long overdue, and I'm going to discuss those. Sadly, I'm going to be a no on the bill, though, because, again, since it's in this giant omnibus package, we're talking about, yet again, spending millions of dollars that I'll go into the details of that in a minute, but I do want to talk about the high points because it's something that I've spoken about, I believe, in this very spot over the last 2 years. Many of you have heard either in committee or here at the well. I had a personal experience about this when my son, my oldest son, had knee surgery at the age of 16 or 17 and was prescribed what I felt was a very high dose and a very large quantity of painkillers after a knee surgery. So, colleagues, what we're talking about here are teenagers who were receiving these medications with absolutely no counseling and absolutely no warnings to the dangers of overdose and addiction. And I was so incensed over that I actually kept the bottle, and I still have the bottle of morphine sulfate that was prescribed to my teenager with no counseling and no verbal warnings about the risk of overdose and addiction. And so to see these sections in here where we are requiring certain healthcare providers, need to move down, requiring a prescription for an opioid for outpatient use to bear a warning label, and for requiring the counseling that needs to happen from the pharmacist around the risks of overdose and addiction, I think are absolutely fantastic. And again, well overdue. If that's what this bill was about, I would be an enthusiastic yes vote on this bill. So colleagues, when we get into the cost, I don't think that we've had a session down here yet, at least not that I recall, where we haven't allocated money to the University of Colorado Center for Research into Substance Use Disorder Prevention, Treatment, Recovery Support Strategies, the center there at CU. This is an organization that's done great work. They provide fantastic testimony for us, both, I believe, in the SMART Act hearings, but certainly in the health committees. And I've got tremendous respect for those folks, which is why historically I have voted, I think every time it's come up, to provide hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, towards supporting the center. But here's the issue. Now we're talking about nearly $3 million from the marijuana tax cash fund, plus another $3 million of general fund, of which $500,000 is going really to administration in this. So what we've heard in committee from citizens of our state who are struggling with substance use disorders, and my colleague in the Health and Human Services Committee, I think, asked some really profound questions in the last committee meeting around what is it to the testifiers that have brought them through their substance use disorder and successfully out on the other side. Was it government programs? Was it government spending? Or was it a personal decision, personal responsibility that at some point during their struggle, they chose. And the answer time and time again is, and I'm paraphrasing, I wish I would have had more information and more help before I started into things like prescription opioids, so I would have known the risks. But now that I'm in this struggle, what brought me out on the other side were personal decisions that I made. So again, in a world of finite resources, colleagues, citizens of Colorado, you know we don't have an unlimited source of general fund money. So when teachers come to our office and talk about why is more money not going to education, when we talk about mental health, why is there not more money going towards that? Roads, bridges, why is there not money going towards that? And we see bill after bill after bill where it's $1 million here, and in this case, $3 million there. At some point, colleagues, I think the citizens of the state of Colorado who are not struggling with substance use disorders are starting to ask the question. I know they're asking the question of me, where's my part of that money? How much are we going to allocate towards substance use disorder? We've heard that anecdotally, to fix this problem in our state is going to take nearly $1 billion per year, every year, if we really wanted to solve the problem. So if we've heard that we need nearly $1 billion, is $3 million a good use of the taxpayer money that could be going someplace else? And colleagues, remember, over the last 2 years, we have already made great strides in working on the front end of this problem. A limited, I believe, 7-day fill for acute pain. That didn't exist here 3 years ago. That's why my son got basically an unlimited supply of painkillers for his knee surgery. Today, he would be getting a 1 week's prescription. The requirement for e-prescribe, really cutting down on fraudulent use of the old paper prescription pads. Again, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that we're putting to CU to tell us, okay, what are the next steps that we could take? We haven't even seen the results of all of those studies yet, the millions of dollars that we've already put towards it. I have yet to see a comprehensive plan with this is what comes first, this is what comes second, this is what comes third. So to pour millions and millions of additional taxpayer money into this before there's really a plan that comes from the money that we've already spent, and now with things like warning labels. Again, I'm thrilled with this. If this becomes law, that alone makes this bill worthwhile. The counseling that will come from the pharmacy, that alone makes this bill worthwhile. But why wouldn't we do those things first and see what materializes out of that? And I know you'll hear from the proponents is, we don't have time, we don't have time, we don't have time. Well, colleagues, as I understand it, every single year that we put more and more money into this, we've seen more and more opioid deaths. We haven't moved the needle at all yet. Some of these things are going to just take some time after implementation, and to continue putting this much money towards us is something that at this point, colleagues, unfortunately, I can't support. My understanding is that there is plenty of support behind the bill where it's probably going to pass. And again, not to be redundant, but want to give proper credit to the proponents on the education piece of it. It's something that was truly important to me, and I commend them for that. But sadly, I'll be a no vote on Senate Bill 228. Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, I just want to remind you that we are on third reading. You are free to proceed to have conversations in the antechamber. Senator Priola is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I just want to thank everyone who's been involved in the Opioid Interim Committee and all their hard work, especially on this bill and others that have passed through. I also want to thank specifically the good senator from Lakewood and all of her time and passion and understanding of the issue. I also want to thank the President Trump, for taking leadership in this issue. I heard a news report last night of the headway they're making. This issue cuts across all socioeconomic and racial lines. This issue affects us all. Over 70,000 Americans died last year from opioid crisis. I want to specifically point out in Section 3, the warning labels. In the bill summary, it refers to Section 6, but it was amended yesterday. That alone will pay huge dividends. We copied that from Utah, and other states have done the same. And then the fact that it prohibits a physician or a physician's assistant from accepting any direct or indirect benefits for prescribing a specific medication. I think that, too, is a powerful part of this bill. I will be a yes vote.
Is there further discussion regarding Senate Bill 228? Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to come up here and kind of emphasize again, since I'd heard some ambivalence from my colleagues, especially from El Paso County, noting as my colleague from Parker mentioned, the omnibus nature of it. And maybe my colleagues are coming from a point of being fiscally conservative on all these different things and going different directions, and the tax monies involved. I just want to again call my colleagues' attention to page 14 of the bill, which is the maternal fetal medicine pilot program. You know, I think many of us feel very strongly about fetal medicine and care for a baby in utero and postpartum. And I can just want to emphasize to y'all, and this is just from my rough hand knowledge of listening into discussions like this, how challenging the postpartum baby care is when a baby's born addicted to opioids or even marijuana to some degree. But I mean, to the degree there's some addiction there. But particularly we're talking about opioids and narcotics, how challenging that is. It presents challenges for not only the OBGYN professional, but also the pediatrician. And when you think about the challenging health situation of a baby born addicted to some form of narcotics, it just causes you to think upstream and say, well, what could have been done with a treatment program that would be helping two people at one time? And I mean, like, if you think about this pilot program, if we could integrate the health care, we would have a situation where both were providing treatment for the woman and her baby at the same time. Maybe at least to some nominal success by which then the baby is born in a much better situation in terms of drug addiction, while the mother continues on her path to recovery. I know how challenging that is, and again, my colleague from Lakewood has been such an advocate on the part of people struggling to recover from addiction issues, and certainly I have such a great empathy for her and her quest to try to make the laws of Colorado and certainly what we spend our money on helpful in those causes. But again, if I just think out loud here, and knowing the challenge for the mother over a long term, what if we're able to nip it in the bud and help with an integrated health care plan by which the baby, whether it's at that point 1 month old in uterus, 5 months old, 8 months old, if we're able to get the baby born without the narcotics problem, well, that we're starting off right there with a beneficial result, and we're changing the course of a life on day one. And so to me, when I think about the fiscal note and some of the concerns of the other spending initiatives that are highlighted here, I particularly just like this one aspect of the bill enough by which it makes me support the bill overall, knowing that maybe I might look at the other grant initiatives and be no longer nonplussed by them, but maybe actually supported them with additional scrutiny and thinking, but I don't need to. For me, this one program is important enough by which I am persuaded to support the bill and thank my colleagues for their work on it. This was in committee and the Opioid Committee last fall, and I expressed my interest to, at the time, sponsor legislation that had this in the bill. And while not being the Joint Budget Committee made me not as good a candidate to carry this legislation, I will be co-sponsoring this if should it pass today. And I, again, turn to my colleagues as thinking about the complexity of the issue, that there are no guarantees and results with any of this stuff we're doing. The opioid crisis is big. There's cultural issues, I think, fueling addiction. We look at teenage suicide rates up. There's all kinds of things going on, I think, culturally we don't understand. And I think the opioid crisis, besides some of the mechanics of how these drugs have been doled out over the years, which my colleague previously identified, the opioid crisis is a symptom overall, I think, of something we don't really yet understand. But I think what I do understand is that if we can get proper prenatal care that combines the normal OBGYN visits, the normal vitamins, folic acid, whatever else that I recall maybe women take, how about getting some medication-assisted treatment or whatever makes sense to the pregnant patient to hopefully create a better result for the child when born. So I offer those comments to my colleagues from El Paso County to maybe, I guess I'm just trying to make an argument to emphasize the importance of this enough by which other aspects of the bill that they may be ambivalent about and or concerned about the efficacy of the spend come around to maybe going from slightly skeptical of the overall bill to nominally supportive. And again, thank you members for your time. And again, thank you members to those who put this bill together and made this particular program a priority in our session, the 2019 session. Thank you.
Senator Hill.
Mr. President, colleagues, thank you for actually a helpful discussion on this. I want to say thank you to my colleague, especially from Lakewood, and a little conversation off on the side and sharing some of your story, your personal journey as it's gone through and hit many of the timelines that we're talking about here and looking at the cultural change. And that is my challenge. Maybe I am ambivalently against it and almost wonder if I could be ambivalently convinced to support it. There's a skepticism that I continue to have, and you bring up prenatal and newborn care and maternal care, and our history as a country on that is what makes me skeptical. Not skeptical of motivations, not skeptical of intentions, but skeptical of our ability to codify science that continues to change and evolve significantly over time. And I want to give a very specific example on that, Mr. President. When we look at food allergies, so in the last 50 years, last 60 years, we've had an 8,000% increase in food allergies in the United States. And it's baffled scientists for a long time. Allergies that before used to be just for children, now are coming in for adults. Allergies that used to go away when you got to adulthood now stick around. And the philosophy for a long time, and I'm sure every single person in here has heard this, that for the first 2 to 3 years of life, you're supposed to avoid allergens, avoid peanuts, avoid shrimp, avoid honey, avoid any kind of alcohol, including alcohol, right, that may be in flavorings, etc., even candy, right? We were taught to look for this in certain chocolates, to say avoid this at all costs because it can trigger these immunoresponses. Now, in the last couple of years, there's been, as we look at this 8,000% increase in allergies, there's been significant funding. There's a Sean Parker Center at Stanford, and they've just started clinical trials on the exact opposite form of thinking. To say, actually, it looks like microdosing, and by microdosing, we're talking about if you have a gene trigger for allergens to peanuts, starting to microdose even to the level of 1/1,000,000th of a peanut. Whether it's on the skin, whether it's under the tongue, or actually ingesting it, and seeing if we can actually train through microdosing, avoiding these allergens. Now, if you talk to parents out there right now, they're mortified to hear this. They're mortified to hear the idea that maybe you need to introduce dairy products very early on in that child's life, or peanut, or honey.
Would the good senator from Colorado Springs please try to draw the connection to the I'm not understanding the microbiology, the chemistry, the pathophysiology of anaphylactic responses, but please help us understand how that relates to 228.
Absolutely, Mr. President. The story here is that if you talk to any single person, any single current parent out there, they're mortified at the idea that current science is suggesting the exact opposite of what we have done for 5 decades. The exact opposite. And yet we're making the statement with this bill that this is the science, and therefore we are going to train doctors in it. We're going to put warning labels on it. We are going to declare this is the science, and we are helping to create a culture saying this is what it looks like going forward. And I warn us, Mr. President, on this, that history suggests we should be very skeptical on what science is, that science continues to evolve, it continues to change, even as our bodies evolve and change, that we don't know. And to suggest that this deserves to be in law, this is the 4 hours of training for doctors, that these kind of pilot projects, it is very likely that we are training in the wrong area for what science will suggest in 10 or 20 years. And that's, Mr. President, why I say I'm somewhat cautiously opposed to the bill. I think we have a challenge we need to address, but I'm cautious about us saying definitively this is the science going forward when history teaches us so clearly that we should be skeptical, not just of our abilities, certainly we should be skeptical about that, but skeptical just of the science as it's evolved over the last 50 years, and not to make the same mistake going forward that we're going to codify what very clearly we should not have codified over the last 50 years.
Senator Lindy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So I spoke earlier about my broad concerns with the bill based on the financial elements of this and the unsettled potential value that we can bring as government to this question. I think the prior speaker has raised that issue fairly clearly and leaves a significant question hanging over this. But this bill, as I look into it, is a pursuit of trying to help people in crisis, and they are sometimes in crisis by virtue of their own volition, but sometimes they end up in this crisis in a way that they kind of get backed into it. It was not their intention, it was not their volition, it was circumstances that put them in this crisis. And that calls and pulls, I think, on all of our hearts and our heartstrings, so to speak. But as I look into this bill, the pilot program around maternal and child health care pulls especially hard on my heart, because when you consider the chain of disconnection from responsibility for the crisis in which the individual finds itself, there is no one who would be more at risk, no one who is less culpable, no one who is more innocent and in need of greater support from all of us than the child who, in fact, in utero, is addicted to the substance. And so this element of the bill, the Maternal and Child Health Pilot Program, pulls on me in a way that is more compelling than the broader bill, even though the broad bill certainly has good intentions and is well motivated. If there were some way to get at and narrow, and you heard my primary objections were around the fact that we start out with a fiscal note that says there's going to be more expense, if we could figure out some way to narrow and make this a more highly leverageable use of our efforts and of our dollars and of protection for the weakest among us, those least able, those least culpable in the chain of events that lead to this crisis, that would draw me further into a more meaningful conversation around this bill that potentially pulls me toward a resolution to a green button were I still in the House, as opposed to the hand in the air, a no vote that I find myself as now as a member of the Senate. So I simply add this to the debate, add this to the conversation as a note of intention, a note of desire, a note of future willingness to participate, that when we seek to defend those most vulnerable among us, specifically children in utero, that it in fact compels me into a position of desire to provide support, desire to provide protection that is highly beneficial, I think, in the policy space. Mr. President, thank you for your attention to my comments.
Seeing no further discussion on Senate Bill 228, the motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 228 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senators Sonnenberg, Lundin, Smallwood, Hill, Marble, the Minority Leader, Cook. With a vote of 28 ayes, 7 no votes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 228 is passed. Co-sponsors: Senators Priola, Gonzalez, Pedersen, Janal, Story, Todd, Bridges, Crowder, Court, Tate, the Majority Leader. Please add the President. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 188.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 188. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of Senate Bill 188.
Senate Bill 188 by Senators Winter and Williams and Representatives Gray and Duran concerning the creation of a family and medical leave insurance program in connection with creating an implementation plan for a family and medical leave insurance program.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move on third reading and final passage, Senate Bill 188.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is passage of Senate Bill 188 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senators Marble, Cook, Lundin, Quorum, Hill, the Minority Leader, Crowder, Heisey, Sonnenberg, Priola, Gardner, Rankin, Tate, Woodward, Scott. With a vote of 20 ayes, 15 no votes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 188 is passed. Co-sponsors. Co-sponsors. Mr. Majority Leader, Senators Gonzalez, Pedersen, Story, Bridges, Fields, Foote, Rodriguez, Donovan,
He says he has his hand up, but apparently he voted for immediate reconsider.
It's just a step.
Immediate
It's an implementation.
Trying to sell it.
Senate will,
Do you want to reconsider?
Senate will stand in a brief recess. Senate will come back to order. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Having voted, I think, on the prevailing side, although there was some confusion there for a moment, but having voted on the prevailing side, I move to reconsider Senate Bill 188.
The motion is for the reconsideration of Senate Bill 188. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 188 will be, that permission is granted and will be reconsidered. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Bill 188.
Senate Bill 188 by Senators Winter and Williams and Representatives Gray and Durant concerning the creation of a family medical leave insurance program in connection with creating an implementation plan for family medical leave insurance program.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move Senate Bill 188 on third reading and final passage.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the passage of Senate Bill 188 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senator Scott. Senators Tate, Smallwood, Marble, the Minority Leader, Crowder, Lundin, Sonnenberg, Heisey, Coram, Priola, Gardner, Rankin, Cook, Hill, Woodward. With a vote of 19 ayes, 16 no votes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 188 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Foote, Majority Leader, Gonzalez, Pedersen, Story, Fields, Rodriguez. Senators Lee, Danielson. Todd. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to House Bill 1026.
House Bill 1026 by Representatives Catlin, McCluskey, and Senators Quorum and Donovan concerning the fines assessed for violations of law administered by the Division of Parks and Wildlife.
Senator Donovan.
I move on third and final reading, House Bill 1026.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the passage of House Bill 1026 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senators Hill, Sonnenberg, Lundin, Marble, Crowder, the Minority Leader, Cook, Lundin, Heisey, Smallwood, Gardner, Woodward, Scott. With a vote of 23 ayes, 12 no votes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1026 is passed. Co-sponsors. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to House Bill 1288.
House Bill 1288 by Representatives Singer and Duran and Senators Fields and Crowder concerning increasing protections to ensure foster youth siblings maintain sibling relationships by providing foster youth siblings with certain rights in connection with establishing the foster youth sibling Bill of Rights.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1288 on third and final reading. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. I couldn't let this bill come by without stopping to say a few words about it. This has been an effort of tremendous advocacy from the proponents of this bill. We have a handful of foster children and former foster children who have come to the Capitol, I believe, at least 5 times. They were here presenting to us at the Children's Caucus. They came for the House committee meetings. They came for either seconds or thirds or both in the House. They came to the Senate committee meetings to testify, and they were here, I believe, yesterday, hoping that they would be able to see the final passage of this bill yesterday. It's a really compelling story, colleagues, of foster children and former foster children who have literally lost contact with their siblings. These aren't their friends. These aren't people that they used to know or distant cousins. These are their brothers and sisters that, because of flaws in our system, they testified that they had no idea where they were. They didn't know if they were dead or alive. This bill is, first of all, it's extremely common sense. It's completely affordable, and it just changes the mindset around foster children and their siblings. So I'm enthusiastically supporting this bill. I commend the proponents, the sponsors, for bringing it forward, and most importantly, I want to commend the child and young adult advocates who were relentless in making sure that the message came directly from them to us. Great work. You know who you are. Would ask for a yes vote on House Bill 1288.
Further discussion, Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I also think it's a fantastic opportunity to support families in Colorado. It also precludes another bill that is coming over from that, just got through appropriations today. I think we've got an opportunity to seriously look at our foster care system in Colorado and say we need to do a better job. That we need to step up our game. We need to recognize the strength and the power of community and relationships and family, and as a government do a better job of fostering that. I mean, that's what we call it. We call it foster care for a reason. The idea is we're fostering this care and this connection community. In too many instances, we are not doing that in our foster system. So this is a needed reform. It's a needed improvement, as well as creating a couple of other alternative ways to keep kids within their own community and not having so much government step in and control exactly what that experience looks like. So I appreciate the sponsors' willingness to recognize a need and to recognize government's ability to actually step back out of the way and allow these familiar relationships to stay intact.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I recall early this session, one of the first real vigorous debates we had was around foster children and, quite frankly, providing some opportunities to them. I think anything we can do to support, encourage, to help these children who have this natural bond to have a connection and promote and protect and defend that natural bond is appropriate. I'm very supportive of this bill. And I think back to that early debate, which was another discussion around making sure we support transportation issues, making sure that these students can get to schools that serve them. And that, I think, is also a thread that helps tie together these families who may be separated in some meaningful ways by virtue of our system and the way it operates. So I think protecting with a Bill of Rights these siblings is completely appropriate. I'm very supportive of this. And I would be remiss if I didn't pause for a moment to talk just briefly, or to at least acknowledge the name of a parent, Kyle Forty, who lost his life earlier in this session. He was in Africa at the time, but he and his wife Hope have done so much to support and encourage foster children, and I would encourage us all to join in the spirit that Kyle brought to the support and encouragement of foster children, and Hope does as well, as we continue to move policy pieces like this, but also as we as individuals engage in our communities and try and help those who in fact need our support. And I am therefore very supportive of and thankful for and encourage this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the passage of House Bill 1288 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 0 excuse, House Bill 1288 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Donovan, Cook, Court, Marble, Winter, Pedersen, Woodward, Zenzinger, the Majority Leader, Todd, Sonnenberg, Moreno, Priola, Rodriguez, Hill, Janal, Lundin, Quorum, the Minority Leader, Rankin, Story, Williams, Heisey, Smallwood, Gardner, Scott, Tate. Please add the President. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to
Finally.
Senate Bill 198.
Senate Bill 198 by Senator Son Coleman, Representative Monteo and Gray, concerning the continued management of waste tires in connection with making and reducing an appropriation.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. We move Senate Bill 198 on third and final reading and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion regarding Senate Bill 198? Senator Hill.
Mr. President, I know we spoke for a while earlier about, a couple days ago, about my concerns about the economics of this bill. We say we need this bill because the economics didn't work out before. We had a fee in place and we dropped that fee and we said a market did not develop. The reality is we continue to prevent a market from developing. And so when we put this fee back in place, we're going from 50 cents up to $2 for a period, and then again commend the sponsors for dropping that back down to 50 cents after a couple of years. But the idea that we can expect a market to develop while we implement all of the restrictions on that market, namely how they can change prices, how they can do rebates, how they can do refunds, what the overhead is. I mean, we've got 25% allowance for overhead on this, colleagues. No business runs at 25% overhead. No nonprofit runs at 25% overhead. It's just, I don't know why we're codifying that. It shows that it's our fault if a market doesn't come back up. It's our fault if a market does not come around these waste tires. Do we need changes? Yeah. Do we need improvement? Why don't we make a real change? Why don't we, if we're going to increase the fee on it, why don't we set the fee or find a creative way to empower folks to actually solve this problem? The more we think that the 35 of us can solve this problem by dictating exactly what a market needs to look like is the exact reason why markets don't come up to solve this problem. If we want to, if we just want to give them money and say we're going to contract it out and say find the best way to do this, let folks bid on the contract and let folks bid on the opportunity to spend this $6.4 million, absolutely. Let's go down that path. I think we actually could solve this problem, but the way we've done it, Mr. President, is to restrict the very innovation we're seeking to empower, and I think we haven't done a good job. And I know the realities. I know how difficult it is to pass bills. We talk about all the different things we need. Well, you get this one interest group on board by having this requirement in here, and you get another on board by having this requirement in here. The sad reality, though, is that by accommodating all these different interest groups on the process, we make sure that the system fails the taxpayer. And that's why we see these bills again and again and again. And I don't think it's a fault of the sponsors. I think they do a good job on this front. I don't think it's a fault of the intentions of the folks asking for these requirements. But the reality is it's not our job to pick and choose the best requirements for how to make a market. If we're putting this bill in because we didn't have a market before, we should put this bill in a way that actually allows a market to crop up rather than restricting it from the very get-go and making that happen. Colleagues, respectfully ask for a no vote.
Is there further discussion? Senator Heisey.
Thank you, Mr. President. With Senate District 2 being home to the second largest tire dump in the state, I urge an aye vote on this. I don't have Tire Mountain, I have Tire Valley. We found a gully that we could start filling up with tires, came in with some big yellow equipment to just make the gully bigger, deeper, and then proceeded to try to bury them, which didn't work, and creates now additional problems for us trying to recycle them. We do finally have somebody there that is grinding these up. They've found a beneficial use, and they need a little help. They need a little incentive to deal with all the dirt and debris that is on it. It's much more difficult to put these tires to beneficial use when you're digging them up out of the ground. than if you have a clean tire coming straight from your local discount, Big O, whoever you buy your tires from. Also, this bill says for every new tire they grind up, they're going to take 2 out of the out of my tire valley. So we will be making progress on this. It has a 5-year sunset. At that stage of the game, it goes away. So I would encourage an aye vote.
Is there further discussion? Senator Corr.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank the good senator from Fountain, and that's exactly why we need this. We have 60 million tires in our waste dumps, monofills, and illegal dumps. Frankly, California, they're a little bigger than we are. They have 25,000. They have been able to use those tires. The light rail in California is all bedded in the crumbed rubber, the tire-derived aggregate. But part of our problem in Colorado, we have high mountains. We have roads that don't go through that mountains. So it's very, very expensive for people on my side to get a tire to the Front Range where they can utilize those tires. And it costs money. I just recently bought some tires. The system is not in place, but I was charged $4 per tire for a disposal fee. What did the disposal fee buy? Storage trailers. Because they can't take them out and dump them, but they can't afford the freight and the fuel to get them over here to places where they are using these tires. This is a beneficial use. It is a matter of public safety because these tires are out there. If they ever catch on fire, they're almost impossible to put out. And also, the tire-derived fuel is very, very good. I've got a company that I've been talking to recently that would certainly like to use them to produce a fuel. So it is beneficial. We do need that support. 60 million tires, and talking to the proponents of this bill, we feel that we can reduce those monofills in 5 years. And as the good senator from Fountain said, it is a lot more expensive to take those tires out because you have a dirt problem. It costs extra money. We have a lot of freight, so ask for your support.
Senator Woodward.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Senate Bill 198, as far as how to manage these waste tires, when I was first introduced to the concept of this bill, it made a lot of sense to me that we were looking for a way to empty those monofills. They're hazards not only to the environment. If they burn someday, they'll get out of control and burn forever. So at the very beginning, I was a fan of this process. What I've learned as I dig into this a little bit more is I'm worried that our focus is less and less on emptying those monofills as it is to making sure that we take home a little pork, a little bacon back to our districts. This bill was primarily going to fund people who were emptying those monofills, but the recent amendment we just had is now going to give some reimbursement to folks who are simply shredding the tires. I think if we have a chance to burn those tires and get rid of them completely, I would much rather see that than to have us take these shredded tires, spread them over playgrounds and other uses that we're going to have to deal with, and those particles and pieces are going to be around for a long, long time. I think that we've lost a little bit of focus in this bill. There's also been discussion about how we use part of the money to truck tires back from rural Colorado back to the Front Range. And I'm a little confused as to why the same trucks who haul the tires, the brand new tires, out to the rural areas can't simply backhaul the used tires back to where they come from, and perhaps drop them off at one of these plants that can totally destroy the tires. So although in the end I think that this is probably a good bill, I think we've watered it down. I'm concerned that we're going to be back here in 5 or 10 years looking for more money that we're going to put on the backs of people who are driving to work every day to buy those tires, and we'll find ourselves in the same position. I wish there were perhaps mileposts between now and the end of the day when this bill expires, that we could say, you know what, we've emptied 30%, 40%, 50%, and we're moving toward emptying out those monofills, so that we truly are just focused on how to recycle, use, burn up the tires as they come off the vehicles when they're expired. So although I think in the end of the day I'll be supportive of this bill, I think we need to continue to keep focus on what the intention of the bill originally was for, and this is I'm on the fence but leaning yes on this bill.
Is there further discussion? Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. To answer the good senator's question of why the trucks that haul the tires over to the rural areas don't bring the used tires back. The fact is, we don't buy tires truckload at a time. They're brought in a few tires as they're needed to keep your inventory up, but it would be very, very expensive to send them back on those trucks. So ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion? Senator Heisey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real quickly, the good senator from Montrose brought up fire. If you think you're not paying to deal with these tires now, you're mistaken. I can't have a good grassland fire in eastern El Paso County without catching an illegal tire dump on fire. My rural fire departments, they get the grass burned around it, then they move on and let the tire fire burn. They are not equipped to handle this. They call the sheriff, who in Colorado is the wildland fire marshal. He looks out the window, and if he can see the smoke, he calls the state because he knows it is beyond his capability to handle. And then the state comes in and they put out these tire fires from these rogue dumps because people don't want to pay to actually dump it. So they just find some willing landowner that will charge them $100 to dump a truckload of tires, and the next thing you know, we've got a fire that the state and the taxpayers of this state are paying to take care of.
Seeing no further discussion on Senate Bill 198, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 198 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senators Sonnenberg, Hill, Lundin, Cook, Gardner, Smallwood. Gonzalez. With a vote of 28 ayes, 7 no votes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Senate Bill 198 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Priola, Court, Tate. Please add the president. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to House Bill 1274.
House Bill 1274 by Representative Snyder and Senator Heisey concerning the ability of the Board of County Commissioners to delegate to county administrative officials certain land use determinations affecting subdivision plotting.
Senator Heisey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move third and final passage of House Bill 1274. Let's let business move at the speed of business and not the speed of government. I urge an aye vote.
Is there further discussion? Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be a respectful no vote on this, and I'll explain my vote. I was a no in committee. Too often we're having functions of government try and delegate their authority to someone else, and they cannot delegate the responsibility. I understand that what this does is actually streamline the process by taking the discretion of the county out of it. But the reality is, if they want to streamline it, they can do it with the county commissioners being involved. They don't to have this subdivision planning, and I was on a planning commission, so this is not a Greek thing to me. You know, it does take several meetings and whatnot, but you can streamline that by eliminating some of the meetings. But the idea of having the county commissioners excuse themselves and delegate that authority to a subdivision or a planning, you know, I'm not sure that's the way we should go. You see that far too often in government. You know, everybody gets busy and they delegate that authority to somebody else, and therefore they're not doing their functioning as an elected official. So therefore, you know, why not make it easier to streamline? Well, the reality is government itself can streamline the process to make exactly what they want to happen here happen by doing their job. You know, I think that if the county commissioners are so busy they can't perform their duties, maybe they ought to think about stepping aside and letting somebody else be elected that can do that. But I'll be a respectful no on this, because I just think that there's way too much of this in government, as we've experienced in the past on some of these other bills about delegating authority. And the only thing I'm saying is, you know, to actually earn the respect of the American voter, we need to do our job as we are elected, not as we want that job to be after we are elected. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to thank my fellow senator, the good senator from Fountain, for bringing this bill. This bill is actually a somewhat different version of something I was asked to carry in a prior year. And it goes to the core of local control and what authority we vest in our, in this case, county officials. Officials like sheriffs, and how much we trust them, but in this case, county commissioners. Now, the request I received, and I know my colleague from Fountain received, was from county commissioners, in this case of a very large county, with lots and lots of land use issues. And what they said was, you know, the city of Colorado Springs, a home rule city with elected council members who are in charge of land use decisions, has a procedure where they delegate, not all by any means, but certain what I would call administrative decisions around land use to the Planning Commission, or even to the planning director. Now, this is not required in this bill, so this is really important for those counties that have more limited numbers of land use decisions, or for which their residents just absolutely insist that all decisions be made by the county commissioners, even the most mundane of decisions. Those county commissioners can continue to do that. And in fact, if that is what their constituents demand, that is what they ought to do. I venture, and I don't want to speak for the sponsor, but I venture he would agree with that wholeheartedly, that if that is what the constituents of that county prefer and demand, then that is what they must do. But what happens in a larger county with a lot of land use decisions is that this process of go to the Planning Commission, get a decision from the Planning Commission about a final approval of a plat that's been considered and considered on multiple occasions, and then it has to be placed on the agenda for the county commissioners for formal approval. You know what agenda it may very well go on? The consent agenda. But it has to be there, and my colleague from Fountain could say, I don't know whether that's another 2 weeks, month. But what we have then done is slow down those who are engaged in economic activity in our community, those who would build affordable housing, those who would build a road, those who would make a facility available for commerce. And so all this bill is doing is making it a permissible option for those county commissioners who are accountable to their constituents in that county and in that place to choose this option. And it is limited. It's not unrestricted. And so it is, with respect, I must say with absolute respect, it is nevertheless curious to me as to why we would not, as a General Assembly, grant the permissive authority to county commissioners. And I think the view of my colleague from Alamosa is correct for that location and that place and the numbers of decisions that are made. Those constituents, and I heard this on a prior bill from some of the rural parts of Colorado, that's not acceptable to us. And my answer to that is, then you need to tell your commissioners that's not acceptable to us. We do not find that acceptable. What we find in El Paso County for this volume of decisions and numbers of decisions and the amount of activity that we are blessed to have, it is not only something that constituents would like to have, they almost demand to have it so that they can continue with building activity that doesn't cost them additional money while they have crews waiting to begin work. It is a permissive authority. It's not a mandatory authority. It is one that ought to be executed or adopted, if you will, with care and wisdom of those local elected officials. Those who are closest to the constituents know best for the constituents. I ask for an aye vote on House Bill 1274.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move House Bill 1274 lay over until tomorrow, April 26, 2019.
The motion is to lay over House Bill 1274 to tomorrow. Is that what I heard? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion passes. 1274 will lay over till tomorrow. Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Bill 232 lay over until tomorrow, April 26, 2019.
The motion is to lay over House Bill 232 until tomorrow. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. 232 will lay over. Therefore, we are down to 225. Yes. Oh, sorry. I'm just looking down to the numbers. All right, we are on general order second reading, and let's see, Mr. Majority Leader. No, we're not on general order second reading. Oh, we are, okay. So, and Senator Foote. will take the chair. No? Wait. Oh, yeah, I have to do that part. I move that the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general or second reading. Oh, no, you have to do that. Wait a second. Yeah, I know. But who did you just sign? Sorry. Cindy told me first.
General order, second reading of bills. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general order, second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of general order, second reading of bills, and Senator Gonzalez will take the chair.
All right, y'all, I'm caffeinated. The committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Will the clerk please read the title to a bill? Pick a bill, any bill. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move we proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 238.
Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 238? No, sorry. The motion before the body is to proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 238. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. We will proceed. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 238?
Senate Bill 238 by Senator Danielson and Moreno and Representatives Kennedy and Duran, concerning home care service agencies in connection therewith, requiring certain agencies to expend a minimum percentage of their reimbursements from the Colorado Medical Assistance Act as wages for employees who provide direct care, requiring the Department of Health Care Policy and Financing to enforce training requirements and maintain public records concerning the home care workforce, and increasing the reimbursement rate for certain services provided under the Colorado Medical Assistance Act.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 238 and the Health and Human Services Committee report and the Appropriations Committee report.
Thank you. To the Health and Human Services report, Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, in the Health and Human Services Committee, a lot of work was done. There was a lot of consternation over this bill originally. I'm proud to say that we brought stakeholders together. We worked through the differences, and the bill radically changed from what it was before. Let me just explain to you briefly what the bill now includes. The bill, as amended by the Health and Human Services Committee, provides the 8.1% provider rate increase that was originally in the governor's request, and 100% of that increase will be going to worker compensation to help the home health agencies meet the increased minimum wage. It now establishes a wage floor for home care workers of $12.41 an hour. These are some of the lowest paid workers in Colorado, and so it makes sure that we at least raise that up above the general minimum wage. And then it says for the next budget year, in fiscal year 2021, 85% of those rate increases, those provider rate increases, should be passed through and on to worker compensation. And so this is really a bill that's intended to raise the wages of some of the lowest paid workers in Colorado. They do incredibly important work. They take care of our family members, our friends, our neighbors who are limited in physical capacity themselves. And so this is an incredibly important issue, and I encourage your support for the Health and Human Services Committee report.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the Health and Human Services Committee report? Senator, seeing none, the motion is the adoption of the Health and Human Services Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to the Appropriations Committee report, the Appropriations Committee merely appropriated the funds necessary to pass on these provider rate increases to home health agencies. I encourage your support.
Any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Appropriations Committee's report is adopted. To the bill. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, colleagues, I essentially have told you what's in Senate Bill 238 already by explaining the Health and Human Services Committee report. Happy to answer any questions or to turn it over to my co-prime sponsor for any of her comments.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's been my privilege to work with Senator Moreno on this measure to improve home health care by supporting the workers that provide it. These folks provide some of the most critical care for those members of our families and our community that need it the most. Older Coloradans and people with disabilities depend on home health care workers so that they can live at home independently as they see fit. We charge these individual workers with the care of our most beloved family members, friends, and community members, and yet many of them earn the minimum wage and have done so for years on end. 4 years now, I have been hearing from home health care workers across the state saying, we adore our profession. We are invested in our clients. They matter to us. My profession matters. But I am struggling because I cannot pay the bills on a minimum wage. I don't have enough hours to get benefits. I have to have 3 separate jobs just to make ends meet, barely. And these are the folks who are taking care of our most beloved family members. It is well past the time of inaction, and so we've come forward with a step in the right direction to say that this kind of critical work is important enough that we are going to start compensating these folks the way that they need to be. So, what we have here is a simple measure to make sure that the home care workers all across the state are compensated fairly for the work that they do. When you have better paid staff, you have better care, which means better care for the individuals who need this kind of work. I urge an aye vote on the measure, and I am happy to take any questions.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I too would like to add my voice to this conversation and my support of Senate Bill 238. When Senate Bill 238 was first introduced, I had a number of concerns about it. I was concerned about putting a percentage into the formula. I was concerned about the privacy considerations of the workers. I was concerned about some of the requirements that we were putting in around worker training. I had a lot of concerns, in particular about whether those would result in unintended negative consequences to our elderly population, to our disabled population. And so I just want to commend the sponsors for working diligently to address the concerns that I had by meeting with lots of different stakeholders and coming to an agreement around those concerns. I wish to acknowledge that this This bill had a lot of different aspects to it. I don't think that it is perfect by any means, but I am very, very grateful for the good work that was done to address those concerns and bring this into what I think ultimately is a good place, especially for those workers. And so I would urge and I vote.
Senator Danielson. There is an amendment that asks Mr. Carpenter. Please read L025.
Amendment L025.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those who were in the Health and Human Services Committee, you saw a lengthy debate. You had literally 271. The old state library was filled with, I don't know, hundreds of people who came to weigh in on the measure. In the end, the changes that we made in committee brought everyone, most everyone, the stakeholders around the table to agreement in support of the bill, or neutral on the bill. And we're talking about the disability community, organizations that represent the interests of seniors, organizations that represent the interests of the agencies, and organizations that represent the interests of the hardworking Coloradans that provide these services. However, there were still a few loose ends that were kind of sorted out in committee, or at least highlighted, and we listened to that and we wanted to address them. And so we have it was really a technical amendment, not a lot of substance to it, but it honors the agreement that we made in that committee and the commitment that each of these parties have to the intent of the bill and the content of it. It's a kind of a cleanup measure. And I don't know if I moved it. I move L025.
It has been moved.
Thank you, sir, and I ask for an aye vote. There were concerns about whether or not the bill included hospice, so we've included language that excludes hospice clearly. And then we needed to clarify the language to match that in a House Bill 1407, which might not mean much to those of you who are not tracking the debate closely, but it has to do with the reimbursement rate, and that was the commitment that everyone made in committee. And then basically, we needed to exempt the pediatric personal care benefit program. That again was an agreement that we all made. It was a typo in how we referenced it, so we'll fix that. And really, that's it, Mr. Chair, and I'd ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussion on L025? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L025. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. L025 is adopted. To the bill, Senator Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just want to echo what my colleague from Joint Budget Committee said earlier. This is something, and I want to compliment the work of the Health and Human Services Committee. This is one of those issues that we talk about extensively in JBC. We know that home health care workers are some of our lowest paid workers, and interestingly, some of them are totally dependent on Medicaid reimbursement, which puts them in a real bind. And so there are really two issues that I'd like to highlight, not in objection to the bill, because I think they have been corrected. But the first is that we actually are increasing minimum wage faster than we are Medicaid reimbursement if we're not careful. And that issue came up both in JBC and in Human Services. But I just want to highlight that because I think both committees have spent substantial time talking about it. The other thing that I've always felt strongly about is, and we've done this in the past, I've been part of it, I voted for it. We passed money through Medicaid and said how it must be spent by the providing agencies. I think that's a mistake because administrative costs might escalate at a rate that we don't understand, but it's easy for us to say that we must pass money through directly to the workers. That sounds logical, but it isn't when we're dealing with these providers who have different geographic areas, different overhead costs, different constraints. So I think it's a great bill as a result. I want to compliment Health and Human Services. I can assure you that the two committees together are going to be watching this very carefully in the future to make sure we take care of these folks. Thank you.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. This, as you've heard earlier, this was a very interesting Health and Human Services Committee meeting. And colleagues, the reason why I wanted to say a few words about it is because I feel like perhaps more than any other bill we heard this year, it feels like we narrowly averted disaster. So I do want to commend everyone who worked on the issue, but when we talk about a committee room that's packed full of people, colleagues, this committee room was packed full of people. And what we heard was two logical sides to an argument. One saying that these employees, these workers, and what they do is critical to the health and well-being of what is arguably the most vulnerable population in the state of Colorado. And for those folks to earn enough money to where they are motivated to stay in that profession is absolutely critical. However, what we also heard were the folks that run these organizations, that hire and place the workers, as well as the population themselves, those who are being served, saying, if you put such extreme constraints on us as an organization, we cannot stay in business. And if we cannot stay in business, then there will be no worker. There will be nobody who can provide this service to this most vulnerable population that needs it the most. So, wow, you want to talk about a tough situation to be in. So, again, I'm glad that we came to the bill as it stands today, but I would really ask for all of you, when this issue comes up in the future, that we're not needing to make changes on the fly like this, like we did at the very last second, in order to have a situation that's workable. Secondly, I would really implore each of you that when we're talking about compensation to a worker, that it's more inclusive of all of the benefits that this worker receives. I would really like to see, in light of all the conversation we've had around access to high quality health care, that we are encouraging employers like this to provide health insurance. Ideally, affordable health insurance as defined by the Affordable Care Act at a minimum to these workers, so that we know that they are receiving under the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare guidelines good and affordable health insurance, so that they have health care for their own families. I can't imagine a population that needs it more based on the work that they do, the miles that they drive, the hours that they put in, and the stress that a job like that has to bring. So I didn't see anything in the bill, and I apologize to my colleagues if I missed it, that provides health insurance as part of the caregiver compensation. It did not seem like the health insurance costs were included in that. I didn't see anything in the bill that talks about retirement savings. So we've had robust debate over the last few weeks around what can we do to encourage employers to provide a savings plan for their employees. So if an employer is doing that, if an employer is offering a 401k plan or a simple IRA plan, and God bless them if not only are they offering it, but they're willing to do a match to that plan or a non-discretionary contribution to that plan. Shouldn't we be encouraging those employers to also be providing those benefits, which we've all admitted on this floor over the last few weeks is very, very important to those workers. So again, I'm not taking anything away from sort of the cash compensation, payroll, unemployment insurance, workers' comp, and that type of thing. But I would really like to see in the future something that is that kind of reflects the spirit of additional benefits that we've been talking about, things like health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, life insurance, and a retirement plan of some kind. And again, I apologize to the proponents if that is in the bill or in the strike below and I just missed it, or perhaps in the amendment. But that's what I'm hoping for, colleagues, and appreciate the time, Mr. Chair.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to answer my colleague from Douglas County, compensation is really just in this bill applied to the actual wages, not to those other ancillary costs of employment. So compensation as in this bill is really just about wages. And I want to thank the senator from Douglas County. I think I'm going to make my tagline for this legislative session, narrowly averting disaster. So I appreciate you, and thanks for letting me steal that.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 238? Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just briefly, again, as concepts like this move forward, just asking all of us as a body to consider these other benefits that are floating around that we've again agreed to that are important. Would respectfully ask that they perhaps be included in future iterations of this legislation or similar bills. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we talk about quality health care for all Coloradans and taking steps to make sure that we're making it more affordable, we're making it better and accessible, part of that formula is home care workers. People who come into our family members' homes, our community members' homes, and take care of them. Older Coloradans, people with disabilities, and provide that critical care to make sure that they can live independently as long as they want to. This measure makes sure that we are taking a step forward to encourage this workforce to stay in the profession, to pay them better so that we are keeping these quality, professional home care workers in the job that they should be. We don't want them leaving this profession to go work at Starbucks because they'd make more money there. These folks want to stay in the profession, and the people that they take care of deserve to have them there. And it is our duty to address the crisis that we're in right now. We are already deficient when it comes to the number of people who need home care attendants and the number of workers that we have to fill those slots. It is our job to address this crisis now because it's only going to get worse. Colorado is a wonderful place to live, and this state is aging more rapidly than any other state in the nation. And that's because people want to stay here, and they should be able to as they age in place, stay in their homes, be independent. And part of that is those hardworking, dedicated home care workers. And this is a step in the right direction to make sure that we are protecting those workers, because in the end, a more skilled, better trained, better paid workforce means better care for the consumers who depend on it. And I appreciate your time today, and I ask for an aye vote on this measure.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 238? Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, the previous speaker was partially right. We do need home health care, and we do need to have them well paid, but that was not the point of the bill. The point of the bill was there was going to be a raise in wages, but yet there was no increase on payment to the people that own the businesses. So the reality is, if there was to go through, and I understand that the amendments did go through, and I think they'll make it better, but the reality is, if you risk businesses going out of business, you know, just for the wages and not for the businesses to actually have enough money to do business and recoup what their cost is, there could have been, you know, tragic circumstances on this where businesses go out of business and then the people have no jobs. So it's a double-edged sword. But I do believe that what is needed on this particular bill is more federal dollars coming in to basically manage the entire process, not only the workers but the businesses. But you can't just support one without supporting the other one. So if you put all of your money into wages and take away from the businesses and they go out of business, that does not benefit the people who receive the services. So I understand what they're saying, but it's not as simple as the proponents actually profess. You know, it makes it a little bit more complicated, because if the businesses don't stay strong, then the employees that provide this service do not stay strong. Thank you.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and this is germane to the bill, Mr. Chair. All of us in this room depend on the hardworking drafting attorneys that work in the building, and I have to say a shout out to Richard Sweetman. He really worked incredibly hard to accommodate all of the stakeholders on this bill, and I know that every drafter works really hard, and we are so grateful, but I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Richard Sweetman for all of his very dedicated hard work.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 238? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 238. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 238 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we proceed out of order to take up House Bill 1171.
The request is to proceed out of order to have House Bill 1171. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. We will proceed out of order to hear House Bill 1171. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of House Bill 1171.
House Bill 1171 by Representatives Mikeson, Janane, Senators Fields and Perula, concerning expanding the grades eligible for child nutrition school lunch protection program and in connection with making an appropriation.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We move House Bill 1171 with a favorable recommendation.
Any further comment? Seeing none, Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I've mentioned in the past about how many different categorical programs we have in Colorado. We have a significant number of programs designed already to address this. And challengingly, this is so often what happens. We'll put a program in place for a very narrow area. We'll do no quantitative analysis about whether or not it addressed the issue we said we were trying to solve. And then we'll come back a year later or 2 years later or 3 years later and say, hey, we need to expand this to a greater population. And we need to expand this to a greater population. With never any kind of self-reflection, any kind of look back and say, are we solving it? And yes, there's always the emotion to say, well, of course we're solving problems because we're providing more lunches for people. Right now we've got a system where there's a 40-cent copay, for a meal. And we've heard stories about lunch shaming and that people can't afford this. I hear that. I hear that as an option, but are we actually solving the problem, or do we just continue to perpetuate the problem rather than objectively looking at whether or not these programs are reducing exactly what we're trying to fix? So respectfully, I've seen year after year after year these programs expanded with no analysis, and Mr. Chair, I continue to oppose expansion of programs without any objective measure of success.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this bill does something that's very important. It provides an opportunity for our kids in school to have a reduced lunch meal at 40 cents. Some folks might say, well, 40 cents is not a lot, but if you have more than one child and you have kids in a variety of different elementary school or middle school or high school, that can add up. 40 cents. Surely we have enough funds to make sure that we can feed our high school students. That's basically what this bill does. It provides a reduced lunch for our high school students. And if you know anything about high school students, they have a very healthy appetite. And if you're hungry, it's hard to learn, it's hard to concentrate when you are hungry. Some people get a little attitude when they haven't had enough to eat. And we do have food insecurity, where some kids wonder where their next meal is coming from. Unfortunately, they are some of our high school students. This bill allows for those families and that child to be able to get access to a nutritional lunch at the rate of 40 cents. That's what this bill does. When you're hungry, it creates a very negative effect on your ability to perform academically. It's hard to concentrate. It may be hard to do your math when you're hungry. It affects the overall emotional well-being of a young person when you're struggling with not having enough food. And then you're in the cafeteria, everyone's eating but you. I wish we could provide free lunch for everyone so that we don't have lunch shaming, that everybody gets a chance to eat. We are all residents here in the great state of Colorado. What's the big deal to provide a reduced lunch, and you have to qualify to be eligible for a reduced lunch. So it's not like everyone gets it. It's for some of our poorest kids. Because when they get home and they open the refrigerator, there may not be anything in there. But when they're in school and we're trying to prepare them for our global society, why not give them the opportunity to purchase a lunch at 40 cents? This is just one solution to deal with hunger when you're a young person, giving them access to lunch at 40 cents. Members, vote yes on House Bill 1171.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, just to clarify, our schools can already do this. Our schools are allowed to. It's in your law. This is about a grant program that folks have to apply for in order to get reimbursed. We're talking a couple $100s in often cases for our schools. Why do we have all the bureaucracy around getting a couple $100s back for high school students when we could just give the money to our local districts? It's not about saying whether or not school lunch is important or not. It's just about saying we could do this so much more efficiently. Every single one of your schools can already provide this program. It's just about what the state will reimburse for. You could just give them the money and say, go provide it. And then if you want to do it on the lunch program, great. If you want to pay teachers a little bit more, great. If you want to buy iPads, great. Our local districts could do whatever they wanted with this money, but instead what we're saying is the only way you get this money back is filling out lots of paperwork, and then we'll give you the money. And so it advantages those districts that already have a grant writer, that already have someone who's willing to fill out that paperwork. It disadvantages our smaller districts when we could treat all of our children equally. And there's going to be this notion that if you don't do this, high school students won't have access. That is entirely false. You can already do it. School districts already have the local power. This is about how they get reimbursed for it. We could say, waive all the red tape, forget all the paperwork, forget all the grant writing. You can just have the money. It would cost the state not a single penny more. The school districts would get even more money. It would reduce the overhead in Department of Education, and it would be a win-win-win. But instead, we refuse to do that. Instead, we refuse to actually provide and trust our local school districts so that we can make a political statement about what we stand for and what we stand against. And colleagues, I don't think that's what school funding should be for. School funding should be for empowering our districts and our teachers to deliver the best education possible for our students. Again, I ask for a no vote.
Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. One of the things that we talk about in business frequently, which is the environment with which I am more familiar, even though I've toiled in the ed policy space for 8 years now, 9 years now, is core competencies. What are we about? What is our core focus? And how can we achieve that in a better way tomorrow than we're doing today? This is one of those bills, well, very well intended, completely understand it. It becomes something that takes a portion of the enormous amount of money we spend in public education and carves it off and puts it away from the people who we charge with the responsibility of helping us get to student achievement, whom we charge with the responsibility of making sure students are gaining in the academic environment, who are earning the grit and perseverance that we want them to get to. We take that money and carve it off and put it away, and we become prescriptive over this set amount of money. While the intention of this is completely honorable, makes a ton of sense, the reality is it is the death of 1,000 cuts to the idea of focus on our core mission, focus on our core competency, and focus on the deliverable that we're asking our public education system to bring for us. And so there's a discomfort. I mean, it's really hard to vote against money to, in fact, fill a child's tummy or help subsidize the effort to fill a child's tummy. That's really hard to vote against that. But when you stop and back up and say we're charged with using scarce resources to achieve specific objectives, you can see why it becomes very difficult to get comfortable saying aye to a bill of this nature. So it's based on that really theoretical, but at the same time fundamental argument that is, what is our public education system about? And it's about helping students attain achievement. Now, we can get prescriptive and we can say, first grade teacher, we know better. Second grade teacher, we know better. School principal, we know better. But my argument is, here at the General Assembly, we should be creating broad guidelines. We should be creating big elements under which the people who actually know what they're doing would say, here's what I'm choosing to do. Here's what we need to do. And we're serving the whole child. Let them make that judgment, because they do need to, in fact, serve the whole child. They need to serve the whole child in a way that honors how that child shows up to their environment. But we should not be prescribing, especially at the level of granularity that this particular prescription is written. So it is not an easy no vote, but I would argue it is an appropriate no vote, and that is what I urge of you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lundeen. Any further question, or any further discussion, I should say, on House Bill 1171? Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1171. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1171 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we proceed out of order to take up House Bill 1262.
The question before us is to proceed out of order to take up House Bill 1262. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1262 will proceed. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of House Bill 1262.
House Bill 1262 by Representatives Wilson and McLaughlin, Senators Bridges and Fields, concerning state funding for full-day kindergarten educational programs and in connection therewith making and reducing an appropriation.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1262 and the committee report.
To the Appropriations Committee report.
Members.
Senator Fields. Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the Appropriations Committee, we just allotted the funds to support full-day kindergarten in the state of Colorado. I urge and I vote.
Anything further on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill, there is an amendment on the desk. Senator Bridges, did you want to talk about the amendment or just introductory remarks?
Let's do the amendment first, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Carpenter, please read L005.
Amendment L005, House Bill 1262.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. L005 simply says that schools that are not enrolling a sufficient number of children to use all of their retained preschool programs, the department gets to redistribute unused positions. This is a cleanup amendment, and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on L005? Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I understand this correctly, and as I sort through this to the bill sponsor, if a school is already providing full-day K and has a tuition or a mill levy override to provide that full-day K, they will not lose money under this amendment. This will still fund their full-day K. Is that correct?
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we have right now is at many schools across the state, they are using money that is for a preschool program in order to pay for full day K. And what this amendment says is that when they get full funding for full day K, as they will through this bill, if they then don't have a sufficient number of preschoolers to make up the money that they were getting for those kindergarten slots, that funding gets redistributed. But they get to keep any of those, any preschoolers that they get to keep the funding for those kids. No one will be losing any funding through this bill that they don't, currently get.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, that may be the intention, but I don't think that's what this bill says at all, or this amendment says at all. This bill says if the district does not enroll a sufficient number of children to use all of the retained preschool program positions in a budget year, the department shall redistribute the unused positions. So basically, if you have already funded full day K within your district, within your school, and this bill passes, we're now giving you more money for full day K. If they don't transition the opportunities over to pre-K and sufficient number of new pre-K students to use all of that additional money that they're already funding, that money gets taken back away from them. This is not a hold harmless. That's exactly what this amendment says, and it says very specifically, if they don't have enough preschool programs to use all the money in a budget year, the department shall redistribute the unused positions. I don't understand how you can possibly argue that this amendment makes sure that nobody loses any funding when it says the funding shall be redistributed.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to give the sponsors an opportunity to respond because I'm reading it similarly. Let's just clarify.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the good senators from El Paso County would refer to the bill and note that the amendment is striking on page 6, lines 17 through 19. Lines 17 through 19 currently say the district shall not retain in any budget year a number of positions that exceeds the actual number of children that the district enrolls in the preschool program. We are replacing that language. The current language takes away money actively. What this says is if you are currently getting preschool funding for kindergarten kids and the number of preschoolers you get goes up, you don't have to try and find that funding again for those preschoolers. You get to just keep that money and transfer it from your kindergarten program to your preschool program. This is a benefit to schools that are currently using preschool funds to pay for kindergartners. If you look at the language it's replacing compared to the language that is in this amendment, we are ensuring that schools get to keep more funding than they otherwise would.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, and I am in 100% support of the intention. I think the language in the bill that's being struck is very clear. It says you may not increase the number of preschool slots you have. So that's the language that's coming out. I understand that, so that's an active piece. This simply says that if, in fact, you don't enroll a sufficient number to stay to that level, and you don't retain that number of that many preschool slots in any budget year, then the department, and the department's doing this at the state level, this isn't district level, this is at the state level, they shall redistribute the unused positions. So I'm concerned, and I think we're in violent agreement here on the intention and desire. We want to make sure that we're not shortchanging a district. I just want to make sure we're clean on language. And I guess I'm going to defer to the sponsors, but I'm reading it differently.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the good senator from El Paso County trusts Julie Pellegrin, and Julie says that that's what we are doing.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do trust Julie Pellegrin. I'll request a senatorial 5 so we can go over this in detail with her.
Senatorial 5 is granted. The committee will come back to order. Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After thorough discussion, it appears that we have established indeed that what this amendment does is it allows schools who are currently using e-care slots to pay for kindergarten to keep that funding if they have preschool kids that they can use that funding for. And I ask for an aye vote on the amendment.
We are still on L005. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the time the bill sponsors to sort through this with me so I better understand it. And I am convinced that this is actually beneficial and helpful, and ask your support for L005 as well.
Any further discussion? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree. I think it would have been a little bit easier to chat about this ahead of time rather than on the floor. Right now we have e-care slots in Colorado. I think it's a fantastic program that we have that can fund alternately for a district either preschool or kindergarten. And right now we don't need funding for kindergarten anymore, so those e-care slots now have to be 100% for preschool. And again, appreciate the sponsors explaining this. This now says you don't get to keep all of those e-care slots if you don't have enough preschoolers to fill up each of those slots. And any unused slot gets basically put back in the pool and spread around Colorado. So I appreciate the sponsors' willingness to explain this.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And briefly, what the bill said before this amendment is that you just lose those e-care slots. We want to make sure schools can keep the e-care slots they have, but just use them for preschoolers.
Any further discussion on L005? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L005 to House Bill 1262. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. L005 is adopted. To the bill, Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, because I think the argument for full day K is incredibly simple. We know that early education dollars are the most impactful education dollars. The differences that kids show up with at first grade stay with them for the entire rest of their academic careers. Full day kindergarten levels a playing field for our Colorado kids. It gives them a strong start, and I ask for an aye vote on one of the most impactful bills that we are going to pass this session.
Senator Sonnenberg, then Senator Fields. Senator Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to make sure that people understand how important this bill is, especially to rural Colorado. You need to understand, from my perspective, in the rural schools, that if you have half-day kindergarten now, we have kids that don't go to kindergarten at all because their parents may have to drive 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes to school every single day to either take their child to the half-day kindergarten or to pick up their child. And if those are working parents, typically in a rural area where the economy isn't quite as good, some may not even be able to afford to drive to town or drive to school every day.
And if that's the case, they don't go to kindergarten. So they're behind. So half-day kindergarten, quite frankly, is one of the most oppressive education policies we have had for people that are average or below average income. And quite frankly, that's mostly in rural Colorado, a lot in rural Colorado. I'm grateful that we have a bill here that will now allow us to educate kids in kindergarten all at the same level. Let me explain also, there's a number of schools that use tuition to go from the half-day to the full-day kindergarten. Again, if you are a lower or middle income family that can't afford a tuition to go that full day, then again, you don't go at all. And this has an impact on kids that should not have an impact on. Actually, the kids that probably need to be in kindergarten more than other kids. So that we can get a good start for all kids in education, this is important. I'm thankful to the sponsors for bringing the bill. I think it is a good bill, especially for rural Colorado. I think it does indeed, as the sponsor says, levels the playing field for all of education, and I'm grateful that you brought the bill forward. Thank you.
Senator Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to speak for a minute on behalf of the Education Leadership Council, which I co-chair with Commissioner Anthus, our Education K-12 Commissioner. And specifically also with thanks to my ex-partner on this, still partner, Representative Millie Hamner, who about 2 years ago we went to the Lieutenant Governor and Governor and got an executive order to set up something called an Executive Leadership Council. And over a 2-year period with over hundreds of people, 5,000 inputs from citizens, we've tried to digest what the big issues are in education and what the vision should be. And as well as my colleague Senator Todd is on that council as well, and others of you. But, you know, there's nothing, those subcommittees all came out with some priorities, some pieces of vision for our system. Nothing was more important than kids being ready to enter school. And kindergarten became a very important part of that. Ready to enter first grade ties directly to the READ Act, which you are all very supportive of. Thank you very much for that. Teaching our kids to read early. There's nothing more important than getting a start at home and at kindergarten. So this bill does that. Word of caution, you know, we're taking a big leap here. We're adding to our K-12 base funding. So from a funding perspective, we're committing to something here that adds to our base of funding. So we need to be worried about the sustainability of our education funding because we're adding that. That's just a word of caution, but I'm very optimistic about kindergarten and what this will do for our kids. Thank you.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the bill sponsors for bringing this. I think it is very important, and the good senator from Sterling talked about a 15 or 20-minute drive to take that child to kindergarten. About 3 weeks ago, I was visiting with some constituents down in southwest Colorado, and it's a 38-mile drive, 10 miles of that on a narrow gravel road before they hit the highway. So, you know, it was one of those situations that they would haul the kid to school, and then mom would wait around all day for the kids to get out of school because they had kids in full day. So I think this is great. So it actually gives them the opportunity to either go back to the ranch or run errands around all the places that they need to do in southwest Colorado. Totally support this bill.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this has been a fairly long conversation that's evolved a little bit over the course of the legislative session. Started out as a priority for the governor. The bogey at the beginning of the session was nearly $250 million. It's now closer to $170 million, so the dollar amounts come down significantly in the course of the conversation. Early on, there were concerns about lack of flexibility. Every child must participate. Those questions have all been answered. There's a significant amount of flexibility, does not mandate that a child has to go to full-day kindergarten. That's one of the elements that has been negotiated. If, in fact, a parent wants to have their child just in for half of a day, that's a conversation between the parent and the local school. Does not happen at the state level, but the flexibility to have that conversation does exist, and that's very important. That's an evolution of the bill. The charter schools are brought into this in a way that is friendly to them. They do have to do some paperwork to renegotiate their charters, but if their authorizer is giving them static on that effort, then in fact they have an automatic appeal to the State Board of Education to resolve those sorts of issues. So this bill started out as a really big ask. It's still a very significant financial ask of the taxpayers of Colorado, but it's investing into a program that now provides a significant amount more flexibility than it was as originally conceived, which gives comfort, and it speaks into this space that we all acknowledge is so very, very important. We talk from this well on K-3 literacy. Getting a child to literacy by 3rd grade is so very important, because if you don't get there by then, you're going to have challenges on down the road with all the rest of that child's education. This is, in some instances, a beneficial effect on that desire to help that student get to literacy earlier, having them in the full-day environment should they choose to do that. So it is with gratitude for a conversation which has evolved, with gratitude for the fact that this has, in ways, honored parent choice, and it has honored the student as the core element of what we're caring about, the core of the whole conversation, with acknowledgments of all of those elements and the fact that this has been an iterative, evolving process. I am in support of this bill, and I urge your support of the full-day kindergarten initiative as now currently before us as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much for the opportunity and the attention to this matter.
Further discussion. Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I do support this. I support it in committee. We can talk about the policy. I will lodge a frustration, though. I know there's a difference on a bunch of the policies that we're running through here and the pace at which we're running through here. This could be a bipartisan bill. But instead, our leadership in the Senate said, nope, it's not going to be bipartisan. If you go through the Senate sponsorship on this, it will be bipartisan, I'm sure, by the end of this. This should have been introduced as a bipartisan bill, and I'm disappointed that it wasn't. I think we did a disservice by taking other issues around the Capitol and taking a unifying message when it comes to what it looks like to fund education going forward. And I won't presume that the intentions, but it was a failure of leadership in here that this was not a bipartisan bill.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Woodward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to explain I was a no in appropriations based on conversation that I had with local folks back in my community, speaking with superintendent and people on the board. They felt that we were handing them a program and a mandate with strings attached. They have their own needs that they wanted to be able to address first and expand the kindergarten piece as they could and as they took care of what they felt were more pressing issues. In the end, I think the arguments have been made that this bill has been modified enough that there's enough flexibility that I think I will be a yes vote today. But I worry that we're going to continue to fund schools through this ad hoc process of one bill after the other that requires either application through grant programs or you have to use the funding for this or that. And I don't know that that's the right way to pursue school funding, but I will be yes today.
Further discussion? Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise also in, I guess, surprise support of the bill. We've had a discussion all session long, and even with the governor, about funding for full-day K if a district wants to do that. And Colorado is a local control state, 178 school districts, each local school board. They ultimately get to make this decision. I think the better way to do this would have been to give the districts the money with no strings attached and to do so by buying down that negative factor, that amount of money that we have owed K through 12 for about 10 years. Made that argument here on day one. I wish we could have done it that way, but it didn't happen that way. And I'm willing to accept that. There are districts that want to be able to provide this for parents, for kids. And this program will allow them to do that if they opt to do that. If not, I would prefer to give them the money that we owe them and allow them to do with that money what the school board thinks is best. But I do appreciate the sponsors' willingness to work and find compromise, and ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussion? Senator Fields.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a great day in the state of Colorado. This is a great day in the Colorado State Senate. I've been down here for 9 years, and I can't tell you how many times we were not able to move the ball forward as it relates to full-day kindergarten. What we're about ready to do, because it's already passed the House, and with your aye vote, we are going to pass it in the Senate. And this is a good bill, and you've already heard lots of reasons why it's a good bill. It's a good bill for 4 reasons. First of all, it better prepares our children for success. What we're talking about is we're talking about school readiness. When you talk about preschool, what's married up to kindergarten, we're talking about kids knowing how to read and write and know their colors and tie their shoes and their alphabet. This is a good day for the state of Colorado. You talked about the challenges as it relates to some families having difficulty with a half-day program. With this bill, it will no longer be a half-day program. It's going to be a full-day kindergarten. Can you imagine getting a child to school and only having 4 hours to maybe do a little learning? This will give our students, our young learners, an opportunity to do something more with that day. Maybe some arts, maybe some science. This is a good day for Colorado because you think about the budget that's associated. So instead of having a half day and parents having to pay for that other half a day, that's no longer going to be a dilemma for our parents to have to choose before, do I even send my kid to kindergarten because it's too much for me to struggle between the two. It's also a good day for districts. We're not going to rob school districts. We're going to give them the upfront funding to be able to support this measure. That is a good day. And the last point I want to make is it expands learning, early learning for our kids across the state. It addresses the inequity that we have right now. We have this kind of potpourri approach to kindergarten across the state. We are going to fix that with this bill. There's so many people I need to thank along the way because we do have a Kindergarten Now coalition. It has a lot of folks on it. I want to thank you for your advocacy. I want to thank you for being such a champion for kids. And you haven't just done it this year. You're back here year after year after year, making sure that we're doing the best we can to keep the focus on kids in Colorado. So I want to thank you for all of your hard work. And then finally, I want to thank also the governor, our great Governor Polis, for moving the ball forward, finding the money, working with our JBC so that we can get this done and we can have kindergarten starting fall of August of 2019. This is a big deal, and this is a great day for our kids in the state of Colorado.
Great. Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just add to that this is a great bill because it is the opposite of an unfunded mandate. This is a funded non-mandate. If districts don't want to offer full-day K, they don't have to. If parents don't want to send their kids to full-day K, they don't have to. There is nothing in this bill other than here. Let's do this for our kids. And great bills like this don't happen on accident. I want to echo what my co-prime sponsor here said and just thank the incredible coalition that came together to make this bill happen. We had so much support on both sides of the aisle. Thank you, and I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, The motion before the body is the adoption of House Bill 1262. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move we proceed out of order to take up House Bill 1266.
The motion is to take up House Bill 1266. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion is adopted. We will proceed. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1266?
House Bill 1266 by Representative Senator Finberg concerning the voting rights of persons serving a sentence of parole in connection with making an appropriation.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1266.
To the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this is an important bill because it clarifies when someone gets their rights back. This is about saying that when someone is done serving their full time of imprisonment, which in this bill would include when you get out of prison, and are potentially on parole, is what this bill is in regards to. Currently, if someone gets out of prison, they're on probation, they are allowed to vote and they get their rights back. Currently, though, if they are on parole, they do not have those rights. This is simply saying that when you get out of prison, you have served your full term of imprisonment. You may have not served your entire sentence because parole is considered part of that. But we are saying that when you get out, when you are not confined, when you are not in prison, you should get your rights back. So you can start entering society, you can start being a constructive and participating member of your community, which I think we can all agree is good for that individual, but perhaps most importantly, good for the communities and making sure people are being reintegrated in a way where they have something at stake and allowing them to participate in the future of that community they are entering into. I urge and I vote and hope you will support House Bill 1266.
Any further discussion? Senator Sonnenberg. Before you speak, I'm going to relax the coat rule for staff. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, I'm going to be a no vote on this bill, and I wanted to explain why. I think it's important to remember that part of the that part of a sentence is indeed the parole. The parole is issued as a contingent on your behavior. It allows you to get out of prison a little earlier, but you have not completed your sentence. It's fundamentally wrong from my perspective to allow or violate the rule of law that says that if you are in prison, you can't vote. If you are serving a sentence, you can't vote. We are redefining what that sentence means. Parole is indeed still part of your sentence. Parole still means that you have to meet certain requirements and are not free to do what you want to do, yet as we try to engage you back into your community, there are still consequences to your actions. I would ask you to carefully consider, do we want to back this off? And is this an attempt to continue to move to allow people to vote that for years and years and years by law we have said if you are a prisoner, if you are a sentence, that you cannot vote? I would ask you to vote no on this bill so that we can keep those consequences the same. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of House Bill 1266. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. That motion is that bill is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar on general order second reading of bills to later today.
The motion is to lay over the balance of the general order second reading of bills calendar until later. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and we'll come back later. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the committee is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee will rise and report.
We'll be back.
The Senate will come back to order. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, committee will exit reports that considers mock test bills being second reading. There makes following recommendations. Number one, Senate Bill 238 is amended passed second reading and gross place counted for the reading and final passage. House Bill 1171, House Bill 1262 as amended. House Bill 1266 passed second reading, revised place counted for the reading and final passage. Senate Bill 225, House Bill 1246, Senate Bill 007 as amended, Senate Bill 1227, Senate Bill 250, Senate Bill 243, House Bill 1192, House Bill 1210, House Bill 1024, House Bill 1032, House Bill 1090, House Bill 1132, Senate Bill 67, House Bill 1259, House Bill 1248, House Bill 1202, House Bill 1188, House Bill 1184, laid over until 4/25/19, retain their place in the calendar.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of the report.
The motion is for the adoption of the committee whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 238 is amended, passed on second reading, ordering gross and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1171, House Bill 1262 as amended, House Bill 1266 passed on second reading, ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 225, House Bill 1246, Senate Bill 07 as amended, House Bill 1227, Senate Bill 250, Senate Bill 243, House Bill 1192, House Bill 1210, House Bill 1024, House Bill 1032, House Bill 1090, House Bill 1132, Senate Bill 67, House Bill 1150, House Bill 1259, House Bill 1248, House Bill 12012, House Bill 1188, House Bill 1184, laid over until 4/25/2019, retaining their place on the calendar. Committee reports.
April 2019 Committee on Legislative Council of Consideration of Committee following Senate Bill 244 be referred favorably. Committee on Appropriations.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to make sure that people understand that we have in the chamber with us one of the finest people with the surname Garcia, And if you would like to introduce her, Mr. President, I will yield to you, but I want to make sure that you know that my favorite Garcia is now in the chamber with us.
Thank you to the good Senator. It sounds like it's the Senate's favorite. Members, will you please help me welcome my wife, Michelle Garcia, who's here with me today. Announcements. Sarah Marble.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you so very much. Today, colleagues, we are honored to have Christian home educators of Colorado and the homeschooling families across the state of Colorado. And for that, I would love to read this tribute stating, the Colorado Senate convened the first regular session of the 72nd General Assembly, hereby extends recognition to Christian home educators of Colorado and the homeschooling families across the state of Colorado. The Colorado Senate congratulates Christian home educators of Colorado and homeschooling families across the state of Colorado. Christian home educators of Colorado has been an invaluable resource to assist parents as they educate their children at home. We are grateful for their dedication to the education of Colorado students. Home education is part of America's national heritage, as evidenced in the formative years of home-educated Americans such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Quincy Adams, Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. Parents who have home educated their children are to be commended for their extraordinary sacrifice and commitment that has produced millions of home educated graduates who are equipped to be successful and productive citizens, not only for our state, but for our country. The Senate of the 72nd General Assembly of the state of Colorado honors, thanks, and celebrates home educators and their home-educated children. On request of Senator Vicki Marble, given this 25th day of April 2019, State Capitol, Denver, Colorado, signed by Leroy M. Garcia, President of the Senate. And colleagues, they were here earlier this morning filling the gallery and here on the floor with us. I would like to also mention that it was our own Senator Kevin Lundberg who started the Christian Homeschoolers Association over 25 years ago. It is a thriving organization that we as Coloradoans can be so very proud of. These homeschoolers have produced college-educated graduates from the great educating higher ed like Hillsdale College, and they have gone on to be contributors to, say, Fox News. They are attorneys. They are constitutional scholars. These children who are homeschooled also go on to be some of the aides that you see on the congressional level. They are fantastic. They are benefiting our state, and I just want to congratulate them for all they do for the state of Colorado and for being here today.
Senator Coram.
Thank you, Madam President. I would ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I guess I should also address this to the President, if he is listening, but I would like to be excused for the remainder of the session. I have negotiated with the lovely Michelle Garcia that we are going to Bali for the next of the session. Thank you.
Mr. President and Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam President. To the good senator from Montrose, that offer is not on the table.
My understanding, Mr. President, that in your household, it is the other member of the household who does make decisions of that nature, so.
That is
And it is evident that it appears that Senator Quorum and Mrs. Garcia are leaving the chamber together. So, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam President. That is an absolute fact. Members, I want to be brief this morning and just thank you for, this is an announcement regarding an upcoming event. You may have noticed that you had a nice little care package on your desk, compliments of the Pueblo Greater Chamber, which includes some salsa and chips, but also two key things that if you are interested, every summer we kind of struggle with this. It has a note for the upcoming legislative barbecue, which this year will be Friday, August 23rd at the Colorado State Fair. We'd love for you to join us. And also, building on an event that we have built for 4-H and FFA scholarships, a golf tournament that morning. So if you are interested in supporting the Colorado State Fair, 4-H and FFA, and all that we highlight in this state on behalf of agriculture, we'd love to have you join us.
Further announcements. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Members, it's time to throw down. I'm very glad that the good president has made reference to the amazing Pueblo salsa that we all received on our desk today. And members, I think that we can do better. I think, and I know, that I can beat the president any day of the week. I can beat any member in this body any day of the week on your chili. And so to that end, members, I want to let y'all know that I am today throwing down for a chili cook-off, date and time to be announced, rules to be promulgated. But y'all, it's on.
Will we convene that in Mali? Is that Senator Crowder?
Anytime, anywhere, if you think you're woman enough if you absolutely think that you can actually cook chili better than anybody in Southern Colorado, you just come on, lady. You just go, girl. But I will tell you, you will regret the day that you ever come up here to say that you would be a chili champion. My goodness, what's this world coming to? These people get... Oh, hi,
Crowder Country.
These people come up here and think they can cook chili. The metro area chili. You come into Southern Colorado, lady, where men are men and women are proud, and we will show you how to make chili. And don't think for a minute you can promulgate the rules. I accept your challenge.
Órale.
The senator from Alamosa and I accept the challenge, and the senator from Denver is no longer recognized. Further announcements. Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
I would like to also accept that challenge. I'd like to participate. I will be participating in bringing some urban African-American chili. So let's get it on.
Further announcements. Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'm going to bring the suburban white woman chili. And it is very good. I'm willing to throw down. And second, Transportation Energy will meet in 354 in 15 minutes.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Members who are advocating for the chili cook-off, I am going to volunteer to be an expert judge. I do have a word of admonition. The last time I was participating in a big chili cook-off, about 100 entries, it turns out, this could be an adverse result to caution you guys, turns out the winner out of 100 entries, the chili came from Wendy's. Be careful of the result.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I recall,
Judiciary will be meeting upon the adjournment of the Finance Committee today. In room 357, we'll be hearing 4 bills, 237, House Bill 1283, the peer review, and a new bill from the House 1282. So look forward to seeing you after Finance.
Senator Court.
A moment of personal privilege, please, Mr. President.
Granted.
Senator Fenberg, Senator Janal, and I take the challenge, and we will create kosher Jewish chili. Now may I have an announcement, please?
Continue, Senator Court.
I don't know that such a thing exists, but we'll try to figure it out. Finance Committee, let's go for 1 o'clock, and let's go fast. I'll see you all upstairs at 1.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I look forward to challenging Southern Colorado's chili.
Senator Phillips.
Mr. President, I have an announcement to make. Members of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee will be meeting at 1:30 over at LSBB. We have, how many confirmations? 3 confirmations, and then we have 2, 4, 6 bills for consideration. And we will be starting at 1:30. See you there.
Senator Foote.
Thank you, Mr. President. State Affairs is set to meet at 1:30. It's a room change. We're going to be in room 271, the old State Library, because it's a meeting time that we don't usually have, so we'd be conflicting with another committee. So we're going to be in 271, Old State Library, starting at 1:30, State Affairs.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Education will be meeting at 1:30. And we have confirmation and several bills. So again, look forward to seeing you in Education. Thank you.
Further announcements. Having no further announcements, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, a couple of quick things. Number one, obviously we are in the final days of session. We know there are certain rules that get waived to certain points. A letter went out about that. The other thing I wanted to mention is there was a letter that went out at the very beginning of session about multi-page amendments in committee. That is not a formal rule, but more of a courtesy and sort of a practice.
Mr. Majority Leader, members, please be sure that you are listening to the Majority Leader's announcements as they are important. Mr. Majority Leader, continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I was saying is that there was a letter that went out earlier this session about multi-page amendments and timing and making sure committee members get those ahead of time. It is not a formal rule as far as I understand, but sort of a courtesy and a common practice here. Just wanted to give folks a heads up that that will be relaxed just because of the final days of session in order to get things through. We will not, there will be times probably when multi-page amendments will be discussed in committees. Obviously, chairs should give discretion and allow recesses for people to digest what is in those amendments. But I just wanted to give a heads up since we are heading into the last week or so of session. We are not planning to come back this evening for floor work, or perhaps we will. Just, I guess, pay attention. No, I'm just kidding. We will not be coming back tonight to allow committees to get through their work. Again, as discussed previously, we are still planning on coming in this weekend for floor work, especially to handle the bills that are coming out of committee in these next couple of days. For now, we will be recessing in order to make sure we keep the desk open for a little bit to get some bills read across and reports read and things like that, but you do not need to come back for floor work, so no need to listen for a call. Mr. President, for now, I move the Senate recess until 1 p.m. today.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Before we recess, I just want to be sure that you all understand that we look forward to the Senate State Fair Chili Competition 2019. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand in recess until 1300.